I only borrowed the dress for 5 minutes. It wasn't even fancy. Just a pale lavender dress my mom had bought years ago and never wore. I slipped it on because I wanted to see how it looked. That was my first mistake. The fabric felt soft against my skin, and for once, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the invisible one. I saw a woman, someone who could belong in her own reflection. I twirled once, smiling at the faint scent of perfume still clinging to the cloth, my mom's signature fragrance, the same one she said was for women who were wanted. The door slammed open before I could change back. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. My mom stood there, her hand gripping the doorknob so tightly the wood creaked. She wore her robe, hair pinned up, face twisted in disbelief that quickly curdled into disgust. Whose dress is that? My throat tightened. I was just, whose dress? She shouted. Yours, I whispered. I just wanted to try it. I didn't mean. She was across the room before I could finish. Her perfume bottle sat on the dresser beside me. Crystal, sharp-edged, expensive. She snatched it up, her voice trembling not with sadness, but fury. You don't get to smell like me, she hissed. You don't get to look like me. Mom, please. The cold mist hit my face before I could move. The sting was instant. It burned, sharp and chemical, slicing through my eyes. I screamed, stumbling back, clawing at my face. Mom, stop! Her voice stayed calm. Now maybe you'll remember what happens when you take what isn't yours. I fell against the dresser, gasping, my vision blurred, tears mixing with the perfume as it burned deeper. I could barely see her outline anymore, just the shape of her fury, the shadow of her hatred. Then, from the hallway, came the sound of a laugh. Deep, cruel. Dad. He leaned against the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching me cry like it was entertainment. If she's blind now, he said, voice full of dark amusement, maybe she won't see she's a burden. Mom chuckled softly, wiping the perfume bottle clean with a tissue. She's lucky it didn't break her skin. She's too soft. Always has been. I could barely open my eyes. The burning felt endless. Why would you? Dad cut me off with a sigh. Stop dramatizing. You wanted to look grown up, didn't you? Now you've learned. Nothing's free in this house. They walked out together, their voices fading down the hall, discussing dinner like nothing had happened. I stayed there on the floor, shaking, unable to see straight, my breath coming in small gasps. I crawled to the bathroom, clutching the edge of the sink, trying to splash water on my face. The water stung too. I sobbed quietly, not just from pain, but from shame, because it wasn't the first time. There had been smaller cruelties, before. Insults disguised as lessons, mockery disguised as care. When I was 10, Dad made me scrub the garage floor because I needed to learn what hard work looks like. When I was 12, Mom told me, some faces just aren't meant for makeup. When I got my first job at 19, they said, don't get too proud. Nobody hires girls like you for your brains. It was a pattern I had mistaken for parenting. That night, I lay in bed with a damp cloth over my eyes. Every blink was pain, but not as much as the memory of Dad's laughter. I thought of calling someone, a friend, maybe. But then I realized I didn't have anyone left who'd believe me. Mom had a way of making sure of that. She told my cousins once, she exaggerates things for attention. You know how sensitive she is. And when I cried that day, they believed her. Everyone always did. The next morning, I could open my eyes again, though the light felt like needles. I looked at my reflection, red, swollen eyes, pale skin streaked with salt. The lavender dress hung on the chair, a few drops of perfume staining the fabric where it had spilled. It didn't smell sweet anymore. It smelled bitter, sharp, like the air after something burns. When I went to the kitchen, Mom was sipping coffee like nothing had happened. You look awful, she said, without looking up. I stood there silently, my hands shaking at my sides. Dad folded his newspaper. You owe your mother an apology. For what? For touching what isn't yours, he said simply. Something broke inside me then, but it wasn't a loud kind of breaking. It was quiet, the kind that feels like the end of fear. I turned to Mom. You hurt me. She raised an eyebrow. You made me. I didn't deserve that. Dad smirked. Deserve is a strong word for someone who's never given anything. I looked at both of them and realized I could keep arguing forever, and they'd never hear me. Because to them, I wasn't a person. I was a reflection they didn't want to see, the part of themselves they'd buried. So I stopped talking. I went upstairs, packed a small bag, and left without saying goodbye. They didn't call. Not that day, not the next. It took 2 weeks before the silence started to feel like air again. 2 weeks before the burning in my eyes faded into dull soreness. But every time I blinked, I saw flashes of that lavender dress, the perfume, their laughter. That's when I made a promise to myself. They'd think I'd gone quiet because I was broken. But I wasn't broken. I was waiting. And one day, when they finally saw me again, they'd realize that the girl they tried to blind had learned how to see through everything. I didn't realize how far silence could take me until I started living in it. Days turned into weeks, and I learned how to breathe again without waiting for someone to insult the sound of it. I found a small apartment above a laundromat. One window, one bed, and peace so quiet it almost scared me. I got a job at a local bookstore. The owner, Mrs. Green, was an older woman with kind eyes who spoke softly, like someone who understood what broken things sounded like when they tried to hold themselves together. You can start with the back shelves, she said. No rush. No rush. No shouting. No laughter at my expense. Every day I dusted books, alphabetized shelves, and learned to exist without flinching. Sometimes, when customers asked about new arrivals, I'd catch my reflection in the glass door. Same girl, new stillness. The bruises around my eyes had faded, but the memory didn't. It never would. At night, I'd lie awake replaying that day. The hiss of the spray, the laughter, my own voice breaking. It didn't haunt me anymore. It drove me. Then, one afternoon, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. But I knew the rhythm of their chaos even through silence. It was Mom. The text said, "Your father's not well. If you have any decency left, you'll visit. He keeps asking why his daughter hates him." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Hates him? He'd called me a burden while I screamed in pain, and now he wanted pity. I typed a reply, then deleted it. I didn't owe them a word. Still, that night, I couldn't sleep, because beneath the anger was something worse. Curiosity. The kind that comes from years of being desperate for closure, even when you know there's none to be found. 3 days later, I went. Their house hadn't changed. The porch light flickered like it always had, the same chipped mailbox, the same smell of cheap air freshener when I stepped inside. Mom looked startled when she saw me, not guilty. Startled, like someone who'd seen a ghost they thought was gone for good. "You came," she said, voice thin. I nodded once. "You said Dad's sick." She gestured vaguely toward the living room. "He's resting. Don't upset him." The way she said it made me laugh, quietly, bitterly, as if I were still the problem. Dad was lying on the couch, half reclined, TV blaring some old show. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes, those eyes, still had that same sneer in them, just softened by exhaustion. "Well," he said, glancing at me, "look who found her way home. Guess the world didn't treat you better after all." I didn't sit. I didn't speak right away. I just looked at him, at the man who'd once laughed while I begged for help. "You called me a burden," I said finally. He smirked faintly. "You were." Mom, standing by the doorway, said, "Don't start. He's weak." I turned toward her. "He was weak that day, too, but it didn't stop him from watching you hurt me." Something flickered in her face. Not guilt, just irritation. "You still on that? You can't keep holding on to the past forever." "The past?" I said softly. My eyes burned for days. "You made me apologize for it." Dad chuckled weakly. "Still dramatic." I took a deep breath and stepped closer. "You know what's funny? I used to believe everything you said, that I was a problem, that I ruined things. But you were wrong. You just didn't want to see yourselves." Mom's arms folded tighter. "If you came here to lecture us, leave. I smiled faintly. No. I came here to tell you that the girl you tried to break isn't coming back again. She scoffed. Oh, please, you'll always need us. Need you? I said quietly. I haven't needed you for a long time, but I wanted you to see me, just once, without your lies. For a moment the room went still, the TV hummed. Dad's smirk faded. Mom looked like she didn't know what to say, which was new and satisfying. I turned to go. As I reached the door, Mom said sharply, "If you walk out, don't expect us to be here when you decide to crawl back." I looked over my shoulder, calm. That's the point. And I left. Outside, the air smelled like rain and soil. Real air, not the stale perfume that used to choke the house. I stood there for a long moment, letting the cold sting my eyes. But this time, the sting didn't come from pain. It came from the wind, and it felt like freedom. That night, I went home and opened a small notebook. On the first page, I wrote one sentence. They can't blind what they never saw in the first place. It wasn't revenge yet, but it was the beginning of something they could never take back. A month passed after that visit, and the silence that followed was heavier than ever, but this time, it was theirs, not mine. No calls, no messages, no guilt thrown my way. They were used to me chasing them after every cruelty, begging for scraps of love. This time, I let the silence eat at them instead. Work at the bookstore became my rhythm, my therapy. I'd lost count of how many people came in looking for something to help them escape their own families. Novels about forgiveness, about loss, about survival. I used to avoid those shelves. Now, I understood them. One evening, Mrs. Green found me sorting a shipment. She smiled softly. "You don't look like someone running from ghosts anymore," she said. "Maybe I stopped being haunted," I replied. She nodded. "Or maybe you just outgrew the house that built them." That night, I walked home through the drizzle. The streetlights blurred through raindrops, and for a moment, I thought of that perfume, how it used to fill every room, how I couldn't breathe without smelling her control. Now all I smelled was rain, paper, ink, the scent of my own life. A few weeks later, a letter came. No envelope, just folded paper left on my doorstep. Mom's handwriting. I almost threw it away, but something in me wanted to know how low they'd sink. It said, "Your father's health is worse. He wants to see you before it's too late. Don't punish him for one mistake. You'll regret it when we're gone. One mistake." That's all it ever was to her. A mistake, not a choice. Still, I went, not out of pity, but closure. I needed to see for myself if they'd changed or if I'd finally grown too far beyond their reach. The house looked smaller this time. The garden was dying, the shutters unpainted. Mom answered the door, older, slower, her robe hanging loosely. She didn't smile. "He's upstairs," she said quietly. I went up. Dad was lying in bed, the smell of medicine filling the room. He looked at me and smirked weakly. "Took you long enough." "I had to make sure it was worth the trip," I said. He coughed, a low, dry sound. "Still got that attitude. You never learned respect." "Respect?" I repeated. "You mean fear? That's what you called it." His lips curled. "You think you're better than us now?" I leaned forward just slightly. "No. I just finally know I was never worse." For a long time, he said nothing. He just stared at me. Not the way a father looks at a daughter, but like he was trying to see how much of himself still lived in me. When he realized he couldn't find any, he looked away. I stood there for another moment, letting the silence stretch, then said, "You once told me if I went blind, I'd stop seeing that I was a burden. Turns out I didn't need to lose my sight, just my patience." He didn't answer. I didn't wait for one. Downstairs, Mom was sitting at the table. She looked up, eyes rimmed red. "He doesn't have much time," she said softly. "Then maybe he should spend it remembering," I said. Her lips quivered. "You can't keep holding on to hate forever." "I'm not," I said, slipping my bag over my shoulder. "I just stopped pretending what you did was love." She looked away then, staring at the floor. For the first time in my life, she didn't have a comeback. I left without another word. Outside, the air was cold and clean. I walked until their house was just another blur behind me, until the ache in my chest turned into something steadier, not anger, not sorrow, just release. A few months later, Mrs. Green offered me a promotion, managing the bookstore when she retired. "You've got a calm way of handling chaos," she said. "That's rare." I smiled. I learned it the hard way. On her last day, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a small bottle of perfume, the same lavender scent my mother used to wear. My hands shook as I uncapped it. "Thought you'd like it," Mrs. Green said. "Smells peaceful, doesn't it?" I nodded slowly. It did. This time, it didn't burn. That evening, I sprayed it once into the air of the empty shop, watching the mist catch the sunset light. It wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a choice. My choice. I walked home through the fading daylight, my reflection glowing faintly in the shop window as I locked up, eyes clear, shoulders straight. They had tried to blind me, but all they'd done was teach me how to see in the dark, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what I saw. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.